thanks everybody for coming to the Ypsilanti Mayoral Candidates Forum. It's presented by the Ypsilanti Mayoral Candidates Forum Committee. We'd like to thank a lot of people. We'd like to thank the rest of the committee, Lindsay Geringer, who couldn't be here tonight, and Laura Bean, who will also be serving as moderator. We want to thank the host, the Ypsilanti District Library. Without them, we wouldn't be here. We want to thank Lynette Lau for for doing the design for the poster. We want to thank Patrick Elkins for doing the sound prep, and Amber Fellows tonight doing the sound, running the soundboards. Thanks so much, Amber. We couldn't have done it without the equipment that has been donated, lent for the event. So we want to thank Shelley Salon, Jerome Drummond, the Dreamland Theater, and Amanda Sepola. We wanted to thank number 7. We wanted to thank Brad Perkins from Worm Farm Recordings for re-recording this. Thanks so much. We wanted to thank the media, WDEE, MLive, the Ypsi Courier, and WEMU for all being here. Thanks so much. Wanted to thank.
Do you have a microphone?
Oh, sorry. Did anybody catch any of that? Okay. Do you want me to say it again? No? Okay, great. Can everybody in the back hear me? Okay. We do have mics for the moderator and for the 3 candidates that were donated by the people I mentioned. And then I want to thank Marta for helping with note cards because we will be having questions from the audience submitted on note cards. I also wanted to thank Mary Larkin for doing the time. And I want to thank the candidates and their campaigns for being here. Thanks so much. And of course, most of all, I wanted to thank all of you, the Ypsi citizens, for being here. So thanks so much. This is why this is happening. So the way we'll be doing it is Laura Bean from the Ypsilanti Mayoral Committee is going to be the moderator. Each candidate is going to get 3 minutes for an opening statement. And there will be questions then. There will be 10 questions from the committee, and each candidate will get 2 minutes to answer. And then after that, we will have time for a few questions submitted on note cards to the moderator for audience input as well. And then there will be 3 minutes at the end for each candidate also to have a closing statement. And Mary Larkin will be making sure that we are set on time. When there's 30 seconds left, there'll be a little yellow thing right there. And then there will be the red one for your time is up. All right, so with that, I will turn it over to Laura Bean.
Thank you, Ben. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming out tonight. My name is Laura Bean. I'm a local history writer. I'm honored to be here as moderator today. And at this time, I'd like to ask the candidates to please come forward and take a seat at the candidates' table, if they would, please. As Ben told you, tonight's debate will begin with opening statements of 3 minutes each from tonight's candidates, Ms. Amanda Edmonds, Mr. Pete Murdock, Mr. Tyron Bridges. We'll start with a statement from Amanda. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for coming tonight. Oh, microphone, hold on. Thanks everyone for coming tonight, and thanks to all of our hosts in the library. So I'm Amanda Edmonds. I know many of you out there, and I'm running for mayor of Ypsilanti because I want to create a community where everyone in our community can thrive. So I think we're a community filled with assets. We have great historic architecture, we have strong anchor institutions, and we have so many strong local businesses. And of course, we have a strong and diverse population. And I think we really can build on these assets first to make a community where everyone wants to live, work, go to school, play, and invest. So we can't forget for one day that 1 in 4 of our citizens lives below the poverty line. And if we have done that, we haven't, if we've forgotten that for one day, we haven't done our job as a city government. That we need to create a city where every resident, particularly those residents, can thrive. That's how we create a community where we all can thrive. Supporting employers to pay living wages, finding summer jobs for our teens, making sure that everyone in our community has safe housing and good neighborhoods and chances for jobs, these are essential. So my approach to doing that is positive, is proactive, and it's about attracting people, ideas, investment, and energy to our community. So as mayor, our focus first on economic development through local ownership. That means first supporting our existing local businesses, making sure that they can stay, thrive, and grow within our community. Then it's about attracting new businesses, starting with local first. It's not all local, but starting with local first, because we want business owners who are as invested in the community success as they are in their own, and understand that those two things go hand in hand. As the founder and executive director of Growing Hope, I know what it takes to run a business. I know what it takes to meet payroll every month, to set policy, to operate it with limited resources, and those would be assets that I would bring to our council chambers. And as chairperson of the Ypsilanti Downtown Development Authority, I brought community and business to the table to really define what we want as the future of our commercial districts in particular and our community overall. I've helped streamline the governance of our DDA so that we can function more efficiently and respectfully and focus on what really matters, the big picture of our community thriving. So I'm going to touch on 3 roles the mayor plays and the role I bring to each of those. First, the mayor is our chief ambassador for Ypsilanti, representing us both in the community and with our neighbors and in the region. I think that's my strength, is being that positive ambassador, and I've built relationships over many years in many ways. Second, the mayor facilitates partnerships and positive relationships because we only win when EMU wins, when Ypsi Township wins, when Washtenaw County wins. And I have a history of doing that as well. And third, I think the great honor and responsibility of our mayor is building leadership. And I'm really committed to building pipelines of leadership in our community, particularly among those who haven't been asked to serve, so that we have voices at the table through our city government that represent really the voices of all of our community. So I am appreciative of the opportunity, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Edmonds. Next, we'll go right down the table, and we'll hear an opening statement from Mr. Murdock.
Good evening, everybody. First, I'd like to thank Ben and Lindsay up at the UP and Laura for putting on this event and for the library for hosting it. My name's Pete Murdock. I'm a city councilman, currently serving on city council. I previously served as mayor during the 80s, and I'm the only candidate who has elected experience. I returned to elective office 6 years ago when I saw that our community was moving in the wrong direction and making some big errors. Our municipal government was, so I ran for office to bring my experience there. In the last 6 years, we've gone through some very tough times. We put together things, but we focused on the right stuff. I think in trying to keep the city together and moving forward. We hear a lot about the vision for the city and what's your vision. My vision's fairly simple, and I'm sure it matches a lot of yours and stuff. We want a safe city, we want a clean, attractive city, we want a city with vibrant parks, vibrant activity, we want economic activity that's broad-based and local throughout the community, and we want to base our decisions on sustainability and diversity. Over the last 6 years, we've done that, and I hope we'll speak more on that in the question and answer period.
Speaking to the mic. Hold the mic closer, please.
So with that, with the questions, I hope we can expand on more on what we've done and where we're going. And I'm obviously asking you for vote to continue that progress.
Thank you, Mr. Murdock. And last, let's hear from Mr. Bridges, please.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you for hosting this mayoral forum. As you may know, I'm a lifelong resident of the city of Ypsilanti. Just a few days ago, I turned 45. I'm a single parent of a 15-year-old student in the Ypsilanti Community School District. As we know, our leadership has failed us throughout our city because look at the conditions. There's no joke about it. It's not rocket science. I bring a new form of government, a government that's not bought, that's not joined by any cliques, because I come as a father concerned about youth in the community, concerned about bridging the digital divide amongst low-income families, seniors, disabled residents throughout the city of Ypsilanti. Through my years, my mother had taught me, through the current administration in the 80s, when Pete Murdock was here, when he was mayor, they did noble things back in the days. And my mother was able to reach to the city government and work with the city government and try to bring change in the community. I brought a picture I just wanted to share with everybody. And it touches my heart because this is something me and my mother did years ago. We took a group of at-risk youth on the south side of Ypsilanti and formed a softball team called the Southside Sluggers. A lot of these young men went on to be preachers and did other big things in the world. Just ordinary people doing things. When Pete was mayor back in the days, that's what we called it. Things were vibrant when we opened up to all people, not necessarily one side, because years ago on the north side, we couldn't go over on the north side. So things have changed. And I think it's time for a new source of government, an out-of-the-box thinker, someone who's not bought, someone who's not pushed by any cliques. You can meet with me, you know my history, it's in the archives. I've been in this city for all my life. All I wanted was good things here. I bring passion. I bring three major things that I want to do. I want to do something with crime. As you know, I do an at-risk youth program called the Behavior Workshop, founded in Ypsilanti, that helps at-risk youth right now. Economic development, of course, but we need to give jobs to the ones on the south side that doesn't have jobs. Something for youth to do. I would partner with the community schools and say, can we open up one of the school buildings, at least to work with these youth in a massive way instead of waiting, okay? So, in question and answers, I'm willing to answer more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges. The next part of tonight's debate consists of 10 questions. Each candidate, whom I'll call on in random order for each question, will have 2 minutes to answer each question. After that, we'll have questions from the audience that you'll have a chance to write on note cards, followed by closing statements. But now, let's start with our 10 questions. The first respondent to question number 1 is Mr. Murdock. Mr. Murdock, and I'll repeat this question for the other candidates if you like. Question 1. The city of Ypsilanti has 39 active duty police and fire employees and 113 retirees. According to an independent audit, the Ypsilanti Police and Fire Pension Fund has a $14 million deficit and is now funded at 66%. How would you address this?
I think your numbers are a little bit wrong, but point made. Yes, the city's legacy costs are ones that we have issues with. In the recent years, we've attempted to deal with them in our negotiations with both police and fire unions, where we've reduced some of the benefits, pension benefits and medical benefits for future retirees. We've done the Tier 2, where basically new employees all have a slightly less pension plan. They have different retiree health, they have health savings account instead of regular health benefits when they retire. We've changed the medical coverage for the existing retirees that reduce costs without reducing coverage. But so we're continuing trying to address that. But I think we'll ultimately have to do more. What we don't want to do is basically renege on the promises that we kind of make to some of the employees that have retired already, who don't get those kind of pensions that you see in the newspapers. They get $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 pensions. In the police and fire, they do not get Social Security. So we don't want to damage that, but we have changed the system for new employees.
Thank you, Mr. Murdock. The next person to respond to that question is Mr. Bridges. Mr. Bridges, would you like the question repeated?
Sure.
Question 1. The city of Ypsilanti has 39 active duty police and fire employees and 113 retirees. According to an independent audit, the Ypsilanti Police and Fire Pension Fund has a $14 million deficit and is now funded at 66%. How would you address this?
I would definitely get some help on answering that question, because I'm not definitely sound on the pension funds. But as far as the way that the city has been spending money lately and making the decisions, I know that definitely new leadership is needed, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges. Ms. Edmonds, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I think I'm good, thank you. So I think Councilmember Murdock kind of laid out the current situation and what's been done so far. So there's always room, of course, in future negotiations and union contracts, et cetera. But we also don't want to make our city one that we can't retain our current police and fire force because their benefits aren't on par with other communities. So these legacy costs are very real and are very real in communities all over the place, so we're not alone. So our main strategy, I think, is really we need to grow the pie. We need to grow the revenue pie for the city. So we have to focus on that so that we can not only retain our base numbers of police and firefighters, but have those extra officers we know we really need to do community policing, have relationships with our youth, etc. So I don't have a lot of additional answer besides we grow the pie overall, and we of course continue to look in each union negotiation. But I think we also can think creatively. So what kind of wellness programs are we creating for retirees that might reduce their costs? Maybe that's a drop in the bucket, but we should care about our current and our future, and our past city employees in terms of their health and well-being, and think about what we might do that helps them stay healthier longer. Of course, that keeps them on their pension funds longer, but that maybe reduces the overall cost of healthcare in the end to at least some degree. So that's not a big answer to that, but that's a maybe out of the box way to think about what else can we do besides growing our overall economic base.
Thank you, Ms. Edmonds. For question 2, the first respondent will be Ms. Edmonds. Ms. Edmonds, the city's Water Street debt generates an ongoing annual structural deficit of $1.7 million. How would you address this?
Sure, well, so Water Street is, of course, elephant in the room, but not really the elephant. We all see and talk about it all the time. I think we've done something recently. The city in the master planning process the Shape Ypsi process in the last couple of years, really listening to the citizens and city and council move forward in a good way of changing the paradigm that we were looking at in Water Street. So it's no longer economically viable in our economy for someone to come and develop the whole thing. That's less likely to happen than it was back in the day when that was a possibility and there were contracts to do that. So through the master planning process, dividing Water Street up into individual parcels was a really smart move in terms of looking parcel by parcel. So there are people looking to develop parcels, and we need to be proactive in going and find them, not waiting for them to knock on the door of City Hall, but we need to think about how the mayor and everyone in our community can be ambassadors in that way. I've been doing that already as in my role as a DDA, finding businesses, hearing things, reading the paper, calling folks and saying, what can we do to get you to develop? Another thing, though, I think we can do is that not everyone has the ability to be a developer. They may have a business, they may even have a very viable existing business, but they don't have the ability to put into a building that needs to be built from the ground up. So I think a role that the mayor can play is really helping us to connect the dots as a community. There are a lot of people, there's a lot of talk right now about people wanting art space, arts incubator. I know there are some people I've talked to interested in building on Water Street who have existing stable businesses in some wellness industries, the wellness sort of sector, and would like to connect to others to do the same. So how can we connect the dots so that we can put together developments that build on existing and potential small businesses, as well as attract some of the larger, bigger, more standard investors to Water Street.
Thank you, Ms. Edmonds. The next respondent to question 2 is Mr. Bridges. Mr. Bridges, would you like the question repeated?
No, thank you. Pretty much, if I was mayor, I definitely wouldn't let Water Street sit. I would bring in a carnival or a circus or something for families to come out and enjoy, and we could generate some revenue instead of sitting and let it vegetate like it is right now. I would also seek to do something with the old Ypsilanti plant, because we do have something to invest in our city, which we don't have. We don't have a major food chain, a major grocery store, something like our Aldi's. I would invest in trying to call them with a new team, a new group of folks with a different vibe on trying to get developers to develop. But mainly, first things first, developers need to see that the city is safe to build here. So crime is definitely a major priority first. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges. Mr. Murdock, would you like the question repeated?
No, that's fine, thank you. Water Street, probably 2 minutes isn't enough. But many of the things Ms. Edmonds said about marketing the place is things that we're already doing in the city. I don't know how many times I've called the city manager, Teresa Jolly, and said, hey, have you checked out this person and that person? But let's go back to the system. When I came into office 6 years ago, Water Street still had dilapidated buildings on it. It wasn't ready to develop. 2 developers had already left and abandoned it. That's when we changed focus to market the thing in individual sites instead of the whole thing, because there were no developers. We got $1 million worth of EDA grants. We got some neighborhood stabilization money to clear out the rest of it and eliminate some contamination. We did some zoning descriptions for the site, and we did, most recently, we did through the master planning of Shape Ypsilanti, did the grid system for it to put in the infrastructure. We've got three parcels, 3 projects in the process of being built down there. One of them probably would start next week. Now, for the debt, the city manager, it's $19 million plus change interest for 25 years or 20 years. It's $1.3 million a year to $1.6 million a year. The city manager has put together a very ambitious plan to try to reduce that amount through sales of the property and the possibility of restructuring the debt when some of the bonds become callable in 2 years. So that's pretty ambitious, but if some of that can happen, we can at least reduce that debt somewhat. Still have some challenges left in the city, and we'll move forward on that.
Thank you, Mr. Murdock. For question 3, the first respondent will be Mr. Bridges. Mr. Bridges, in 2014, the city's general fund is projected to have a $1.3 million deficit and a similar deficit in each subsequent fiscal year until at least 2019. What is your plan for restoring city solvency?
Well, if my hair is not all white by then, I definitely approach businesses in the low-tech sector, because I do believe the low-tech sector may help us develop something better on Water Street for local residents that are out of work. Low-tech sector, what I mean by that is in my organization called the Behavior Workshop, I taught a young child, 8 years old, how to build and repair a computer at 8. And now they're hiring children at the age of 14. My son is working at the age of 15. So kids do want jobs. Low-tech jobs could apply to those who are out of work, also families who are in need of support. And also it would spark more people to do more community service work in the community, because there are a lot of out-of-work teachers that wouldn't mind volunteering to help train some people that want to work, that really want to work, such as myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges. Next respondent is Ms. Edmonds. Ms. Edmonds, would you like the question repeated? Question number 3. In 2014, the city's general fund is projected to have a $1.3 million deficit and a similar deficit in each subsequent fiscal year until at least 2019. What is your plan for restoring city solvency?
Sure, so there are some things already going on that are important to continue. The city manager has been working on things like looking at the motor pool, the vehicles we own, and where there are opportunities to liquidate some of those, to share services with other communities. And so there's a good trajectory already on looking at existing expenses and how we reduce expenses. We also, of course, then have to focus on recruiting more base. So there's a couple of components of that. So that's commercial. That includes our big developments like Water Street, like the former Vistion plant, like Motor Wheel. But it also is about tax base for homes in our neighborhoods. So we have to think side by side about commercial and residential and the investment that's needed to grow the overall, again, the overall pie, so to speak. And an important piece on that, an important role the mayor can play with that is about reputation. You know, there's a lot of people with wrong misconceptions about our community in different ways. And I think in some ways we perpetuate it ourselves, and in some ways people put it onto us, media and others and neighbors. And so we have to kind of recognize it's all of our jobs to turn that reputation around and have people understand what most of you probably know here. It's an amazing place to live and work and grow up. And so that is a role the mayor in this ambassadorship role can play and can do in the broader community as well. That also means we have to think, when we're thinking about resident attraction and retention as well as employers, we have to think about our schools. And of course the mayor has no direct role in our public school system, but I think the mayor, as every resident of this city, has to be that positive ambassador for our schools and has to be invested in the success of it, whether or not they have kids in the public schools, because we know that is a limiting factor to people moving here, people staying here, and people even opening a business in our community. So we have to think about that really holistically as we work to grow that economic pie.
Thank you, Ms. Edmonds. Mr. Murdock, would you like the question repeated?
The deficit the structural deficit that we have now is running $1.3 to $1.7 million a year if nothing changes. And the reasons for that are the same as they were 4 years ago. It was healthcare costs, pension costs, Water Street debt, and loss of revenue. This is the first year we had where we've actually had an increase in taxable revenue, taxable value since 2007. It's the first time we've got an increase in revenue sharing since God knows when. Neither one of those take the replace of $1.5 million of revenue sharing we've lost over the years, or the 35% drop in taxable value. But it's going in the right direction anyway. So All those things need to be addressed. Already talked about what we're doing in the pension and healthcare things. We've done a lot in that area. We're going to continue to look at it. Water Street debt, and the explanation of how we must deal with that, and dealing with our finances and just sort of balancing our budget is a normal process. If we got rid of the other two things, that would be easy. A lot of the things in developing new tax base and stuff, it's very difficult because of Headley and Prop A to basically gain a lot of value out of that, taxable value. And out of that, you can get some incrementally, and we should do that because it makes the community better where we have more development and higher values. But it doesn't generate the proportionate revenue stream for the city. So we look at all of those things. You have to do all of them at the same time and see what happens. But the Water Street debt is the big one. That's most of it.
Thank you, Mr. Murdock. Question number 4. The first respondent will be Mr. Murdock. Mr. Murdock, the state of Michigan can begin the process of appointing an emergency financial manager if even one of 19 financial or other conditions are met. As we have seen, Ypsilanti is in danger of violating 3 of these conditions, namely an underfunded pension system, the potential failure to pay back outside debt, and the municipal government ending a fiscal year in a deficit condition. How would you react to the appointment of an emergency financial manager?
Well, we're nowhere, I mean, looking at a snapshot of today, we're not at that position. We're trying to avoid that possibility. I don't think having an emergency manager run the city is much good for us or anybody else. So we have to deal with those issues. Again, it comes back, you mentioned the debt. Say it again, Water Street debt, big elephant in the room. It's the biggest problem the city has financially and otherwise. We can do some other things. We get to the point where we have part of the problem. I can remember several years ago, I went up with the then city manager Ed Carisno, and we met with Treasury officials in Lansing to talk about our situation down the road. That we saw trouble brewing down the road, but we still had a good balance in fund balance and so forth. And we wanted to know if there was anything we could do to kind of structure things so that we could use some of that money to ease us out of our problem. And they were no help, basically. They said we couldn't do that. They couldn't have a structured, basically what would have been a structured emergency manager thing because we had to be insolvent. Well, when you're insolvent, it's too late to do anything. So we weren't very successful in doing that. So we'll keep working at it as best we can. If it gets to the point where that's an issue, we'll have to deal with it then. But we're not aiming for that, don't think it's a good idea, and are trying to avoid it.
Thank you, Mr. Murdock. Next respondent is Mr. Bridges. Mr. Bridges, would you like the question repeated?
Sure.
Question 4. The state of Michigan can begin the process of appointing an emergency financial manager if even one of 19 financial or other conditions are met. As we have seen, Ypsilanti is in danger of violating 3 of these conditions, namely an underfunded pension system, the potential failure to pay back outside debt, and the municipal government ending a fiscal year in a deficit condition. How would you react to the appointment of an emergency financial manager?
Well, a reaction would be shock, if that answers the question. But when I'm mayor, I would work very hard at all sides of the city, and see if we can come up with any solutions to work together. We need to work together in every effort we can to reclaim our city's name. That includes working with Ypsi Township, Pittsfield Township, all of the surrounding cities for ideas. We also need to think outside of the box. Of course, when I'm elected, I'm going to seek good people to have on my administration, such as someone like Amanda with great ideas that we can grow together in the city with all sides included, including the south side of Ypsilanti. Because our poorest people, when they're not striving, the city won't go anywhere. As you can see, when the auto jobs left the city. So we need a lot of out-of-the-box thinking and new form of government because the old way is not working.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges.
So we've, of course, already addressed the growing the pie and then looking at pensions and looking at these things that would cause that. So the question was about how one would react. I think we have one other thing that we need to do is we need to work with Lansing. We know that the structure of the way the state funds local governments and underfunds local governments and funds some differently than others is a big challenge that we have, and is not unlike the challenge many other communities, particularly historic built-out communities, have in the state. So we have lobbying representation in the city, Kirk Profit, and we also have, of course, relationships, and need to have further relationships with our own elected officials, as well as the administration at the government level. If Lansing maybe has a different leader in the governor in the fall, then that might change the situation around emergency managers, because we don't want to get into that situation. I think the question of what would happen if it did, how would I react if it did happen? We worked really, really, really hard so that we weren't doing things like breaking union contracts and some of that authority that's been, I think, overwhelmingly given to our emergency financial managers. So we work to protect our city staff and those who serve us as we, respect where we are and figure out how best to move forward. Work together moving forward. Although again, we'll do everything we can to avoid that situation.
Thank you, Ms. Edmonds. For question 5, the first respondent will be Mr. Bridges. Mr. Bridges, on the 38-acre Water Street property, the Recreation Center will occupy 4.1 acres. The Water Street Flats housing development will occupy 3.1 acres, and Family Dollar will occupy 1.2 acres. This leaves roughly 30 undeveloped acres. What is your vision for this remaining space?
It's quite simple. We do need a grocery store, a major grocery store in the area. It's not an insulting thing to say. It's not rocket science. We need a major grocery store. If not, some place like Randazzo's, where we can get fresh vegetables and fruits. We need something that's going to help our families come out of their homes and feel like all sides are a part of Ypsilanti, not just downtown, folks. Not just downtown. Because as you see, squeezing the south side of Ypsilanti out of economic resources will squeeze problems in your neighborhoods. And I want to fight against that, fight against the cliques, and be a mayor that will break these cliques up, that will bring people together, all races, all races. We are a great Ypsilanti. That's why I haven't left here yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges. Next respondent is Mr. Murdock.
Yeah, the housing project's less than 2 acres, but so there's about 7 to 8 acres basically being developed. With the grid system and so forth, there's probably 13 to 20 acres, 13 acres of development land left. The plan is still the same as it's always been, basically that's mixed unit development with some high density residential there, as well as commercial more along the Michigan Avenue. I think that's still a viable plan, and that's the kind of thing that we would be looking to happen there with the rest of the development. Now, we also have the River Park, Edge Park, whatever they're calling it, along the river, as public space, and we should obviously keep that. Some of the things that Amanda said in terms of trying to get local developers together and matching them with people who aren't developers but want different space. We have a lot of people a lot. Several people I know have contacted me about they're looking for a place to expand. The building they're in isn't right for them. And they'd love to go down to Water Street, but they're not going to build, they don't have the resources to build a big complex, but they would be a tenant, for instance. So collecting these possible tenants and linking them with a developer is kind of what we're putting together and been doing. Now that the economy is slightly better, we are having more interest in the site, at least more than the initial call. There are several things that may or may not happen, but they're not to the point of being very public at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Murdock.
Yeah, so I agree with what some of Councilmember Murdock and Mr. Bridges have said. So making sure our waterfront is still attractive along the way so that we can continue the border-to-border trail. Our Ypsilanti Convention and Visitors Bureau really stresses in their strategic plan for how to attract visitors to the area is thinking about recreation, and that recreation center will be a great anchor for that and the already existing border-to-border trail. So we need to think both on Water Street and the connectivity of Water Street to the rest of our community, both through our parks and the river, but also the connectivity farther east up Michigan Avenue. I live up that way, and that stretch just past Water Street isn't the most attractive. So let's think on Water Street first, but also how that will connect and continue development. A couple of things I think we do have still opportunity for mixed use, so housing. I think we have housing needs for seniors in our community of various incomes so that we have the ability for those aging homeowners in Ypsi, of which there are a lot, to age in place, to be able to move out of their homes when they no longer want or can stay in them, but have another place in the community. And we have a real need for housing like that. In a way, Cross Street Village has played part of that role. We also need to think about the trends and the way that people are working today. So if we think about office space, some of the places in Ann Arbor, like the Mercantile Exchange, are places where independent artists and writers and computer technicians and programmers, etc., are coming together in joint spaces. So working proactively also with developers to design these spaces that reflect the way the next generation are working, which may not be always one company with one floor of a building and their own cubicles, etc. I have actually, in my other hat in Growing Hope, been working on grocery store recruitment for a couple of years now, and it's really tough, and I have financing to bring to I can leverage from the state as well for that. It's really tough, just so you know, because there's so many empty Krogers and Farmer Jacks that that it's really hard for someone to want to make the investment, even if they have good financing, to build new. And I'm still working on that, actually actively, with the Associated Food and Petroleum Dealers, which is the trade association for all of Michigan and Ohio's independent grocers. So we need to think about that connectivity and those things.
Thank you, Ms. Edmonds. Question number 6 will go first also to Ms. Edmonds. Ms. Edmonds, recently Ypsilanti's City and Willow Run school districts merged as a deficit reduction measure. A January 2014 Bridge Magazine survey of Michigan school districts and charter schools ranked Ypsilanti Community Schools at 475 out of 540. What can the city do, and what are the roles of public, private, and charter schools?
Sure, I think as I already mentioned, the city can be an ambassador for the schools. You know, as I've been knocking on hundreds of your doors in the last many months, I've actually talked a lot about schools because it's what people want to talk about. And I've actually been able to spread the word about New Tech High School and about the Montessori preschool or kindergarten option in our district and some of those good things going on. And that's not to paint a rosy picture because things are rough, and I think knew things would be rough in this transition. So we need to think about how can we be present in our schools the way a number of folks from the faith community have been in the high school this past year and helping just to walk the halls and be extra presence in our district. Let's think about ways we as community members can do more of that. We can also think about things that are already conversations happening about helping our police be more connected in our school system so they can build those proactive community policing relationships that avoids problems down the line and helps have those trusting relationships if and when there are problems down the line. So we need to think about those things as well. In terms of the part of the question about charter schools, you know, I'm really torn about charter schools and the option that they're giving our young people in the community. There are some strong ones, there are some weak ones. I'm not so much of a fan of the for-profit charters, and I think they are draining our public schools, unfortunately. But when they're an option, you can't put that past people. I think what Ypsilanti Community Schools have done and is continuing to do, and Ypsi Community Schools 2.0 in these next few years as the schools, the new district gets up and going further, are trying to define a lot of different options within the school district. The Early College Alliance, where people can get a degree or get credits towards a degree from Eastern as they graduate from Ypsi High School. Those sort of things that create schools within schools, in some ways are creating charter schools within the district. And I think that's where we need to put emphasis first before losing more of our kids to charters and the schools of choice in the region.
Thank you, Ms. Edmonds. Next respondent is Mr. Murdock.
Repeat the question.
Absolutely. Recently, Ypsilanti's City and Willow Run school districts merged as a deficit reduction measure. A January 2014 Bridge Magazine survey of Michigan school districts and charter schools ranked Ypsilanti Community Schools at 475 out of 540. What can the city do? And what are the roles of public, private, and charter schools?
The city as a municipality, I mean, it doesn't have a lot of direct connection to the schools. Obviously, it's critically important to our community to have good schools, so we need to do everything we can to promote the schools and make sure that they're good. We do some stuff, as was mentioned, with recently we've done some things with police. The police isn't the answer to the schools, but it is something that's necessary to do. As far as charter schools go, I'm just not a fan of charter schools, particularly private maybe ones. I think that Amanda talked about the things that we realistically could do, and it's basically promoting our schools the best we can. They have to put a product out there that people will want, and I think they're doing that.
Thank you, Mr. Murdock. And Mr. Bridges?
It represents very important things to children when they see their leaders of their cities involved in school. When you can reach a leader and reach out and touch him and know his story or her story, then I could one day want to beat you. Education is important for all, the best education. All of our children deserve the best education, whether it's in public school, private school. I'm not going to knock either one, but in the Ypsi community schools, from a father's standpoint and also a mentor to youth, there are a lot of problems in the schools, and that's because our leaders aren't involved enough. We play sides once again. We can create a problem, but we don't want to claim the problem. We're good at pointing fingers and not coming up with solid solutions. I don't belong on boards and cliques. I used to serve on the Human Relations Commissioner. I did good, very good, until I couldn't be bought. I'm not going down that road. But definitely as mayor, I would be involved wholeheartedly in the school systems. While we're waiting on the rec center, I definitely would ask West Middle School to be open for these youth that's looking for something to do. An idle mind is the devil's workshop, my grandmother once told me, God rest her soul. And I believe that. Look at our youth today. We need more involvement in our government, in schools, because we once were those children obtaining that same education.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges. Question 7 will start with Ms. Edmonds. Ms. Edmonds, the local food movement is a growing part of the local economy. Recent council decisions have allowed raised beds and vacant lot gardening, but have delayed decisions on hoop houses. What is the next step?
The next step is already out there because last month the draft zoning code came out and actually defined some allowances for for hoop houses in different zoning districts as related to lot size and overall coverage and neighbors and things like that. So right now we're going through process, and people who feel one way or the other should speak up about that process. And as many of you know, I support hoop houses, and I'm not shy about that in this community as part of people being able to produce their own food and actually be also, more importantly, in some ways, be able to produce income and jobs from that. So I think though what we need to do in general in community process, and what I would do as mayor, is we respect the process. We have good process, we have open process, so we respect a planning commission to fully vet and use their expertise and their service in the community to weigh in on the big picture and the details. And then it goes the next step and there's a role for approval or disapproval of looking at specific issues on council. So I think that sometimes what happens in the process is that we don't give enough respect to our boards and commissions and our citizens serving that way, who have fully vetted things. And while we should always at the council level open up things when there's a whole lot of community either indecision or opposition to something, we need to not start at square one at issues like at times has happened through some of those issues as those are moving forward. So I'm happy to be pro hoop houses, but I think what's most important at this point is we have a process. So on the DDA, we have decisions, and I share the DDA all the time, that I don't agree with, but I respect that process. And then if we've had good, fair, open process, and we've had good voice and representation, what happens? You move forward, and that's sort of what good governance is about.
Thank you, Ms. Edmonds. Next respondent is Mr. Bridges.
Growing our own vegetables has been in our family for over 40-some years, as long as I can remember. As a child, I was taught how to garden. When we were in Ypsilanti, there were obstacles that prevented us from gardening. Growing up in public housing, everybody can't garden. Everybody can't garden. We would love to, but everybody doesn't have the same luxury. I'm for hoop tents, hoop fences, or whatever. I volunteered for Growing Hope. I put in several raised bed gardens. So I think that is a wonderful thing where you can grow your own, because I've grown mine. I came up with inventions as well. They cost $12. It's a sprinkler system that actually keeps my garden sprinkled. So of course, definitely, I'm into gardening and been that since I was a child. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges. And Mr. Murdock?
When I first got on council 5 years ago, or 6 years ago, big and pending issue was chickens. And the city council, the mayor and city council had voted not to take up chickens. It was going to take too much time. So actually Councilmember Rob and I put together the chicken ordinance with the help of Amanda's group and stuff to put forth. And it was not that easy to pass. We had to make some changes to accommodate some people to pass it. But we ran into that evolved into, we did bees shortly after that, and then we did the food ordinance, which talked about gardens and expanding the placement of gardens and also expanding the placement of food industries, manufacturing, so to speak. So we did that. The hoop house issue got bogged down. Primarily there was opposition to it, to hoop houses in various cases, and it got bogged down into sort of an extreme view of right to farm that was being pushed by some people in the community. So we basically took that out of the ordinance so we could pass the rest of it. And knowing that we were going to do the rezone, the planning commission was going to redo the whole zoning ordinance and basically threw the ball in their court, kind of to deal with some of these issues of hoop houses and other food agricultural issues in the city, as well as some energy issues that weren't covered. So we're waiting for them to deal with that, and then it'll come back to city council to be approved, or rejected or modified. Our issue, difference between planning commission and city council: planning commission doesn't
Time,
get
please.
elected, city council does.
Thank you, Mr. Murdock. For question number 8, the first respondent will be Mr. Bridges. Mr. Bridges, in light of the recent LaForge area shooting of EMU student athlete Demarius Reed, residents' concern about crime in that area has risen. How would you address that concern?
Currently, a lot of our police officers don't know a lot of the residents that live over there. They don't have that relationship with them. So the pertinent information is not given to them. Only until after the fact we scramble and try to find out what happened. As mayor, I would usher more community engagement with our police, because our police needs to be present, not just riding around in cars and trying to capture bad guys after the crime. They need to get acquainted with our residents. They need to know who our residents are, so we can know that our presence and the officers' presence at the same time is one team, just like one Ypsi. Definitely, we have to do proactive measures. If you don't have any prevention programs led by the city, funded by the city, then what are you asking a lot of the other nonprofits locally to do something for the residents that the city has the very responsibility in doing something for? So definitely, I would have our police being involved and being engaged in more proactive and intervention programs for our youth and family who have youth who would constantly wreak havoc on the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges. Next respondent is Mr. Murdock.
Last November, I was asked by Representative Rutledge, Dave Rutledge, to serve on a committee that was meeting with Ypsilanti Township, Eastern Michigan University, and the Sheriff's Department, and eventually some others, to discuss Eastern Washtenaw police and safety concerns. And what came out of that was the Eastern Washtenaw Safety Alliance that was sort of unveiled a week or so ago. A lot of good things have come out of that. We've talked about regionalization and cooperation as far as police activities go. A lot of good stuff has come out of that with Easton basically stepping up to the plate in a way they have not in the past. Better relationships being between the Sheriff's Department, Eastern, and us to provide a multitude of police services that expanded off campus and up into the LaForge area. But it's not just police that's happened. There was things done with the management companies to do better security in that area. We're installing the street lights. Eastern's installing some street lights that they're paying for in that area. So there's a lot of activity going on in that area. Yes, one of the things we need to do, and we've been down on staff because of basically people retiring and stuff, and we're bringing our staff back up to the right level. And that will allow us to do some more aggressive community policing, which is we all want to do. Community policing takes bodies to do it. And we need to get the bodies back. When we do, we're going to try to reinvigorate that process.
Thank you, Mr. Murdock.
So I agree with everything that both have said around community engagement and around community policing and bringing our force back up so that we can do more of that. But I think if we're thinking about and dealing with public safety only when we're having to call for police response, or address and deal with another tragedy in our community, we're thinking about it way too late. I think the Eastern Washtenaw Safety Alliance is a great example of sort of leadership coming together and think more proactively about those borders that really don't matter when it comes to crime. Ypsi could be the safest place in the world, and I live just near Ypsi Township, and I care just as much if my backyard is safe as my front yard. I don't want the crime to be pushed down the street just outside of my neighborhood, because that doesn't help anyone. So we have to think and just recognize that we really are all in this together, because we are a broader Ypsi. I think we can do a couple other things, though. Beyond holding landlords very accountable for their behavior, for their upkeep, etc., we need to think about how we're fostering safe environments throughout our neighborhoods with both sort of carrots and sticks. So we can think proactively in ways like, in Ypsi Pride, think about the 10 worst spots in our community. And let's all focus on those spots. Let's all offer our service and our volunteer time to help clean up, to help make improvements in those spots, because we know broken windows theory, in that someplace that looks bad, looks uncared for, is more likely to have crime. In that area of LaForge, particularly Peninsular Park, there's been some safety issues in Peninsular Park that's very much under the domain of the city of Ypsilanti, and so we need to think about the lighting and such there. So I think we need to both do that enforcement, but also think proactively about the worst places and how we make them better. I'm proud to have just gotten the endorsement of Sheriff Clayton, as well as our former police chief, Amy Walker, because I think we really share this belief holistically about public safety, that it is about more than police response, and it's about thinking broadly about our community.
Thank you, Ms. Edmonds. Question number 9 addresses something that two candidates just touched on, and the first respondent is Ms. Edmonds. Ms. Edmonds, concerning police, the Washtenaw Sheriff, EMU Public Safety Officers, Ypsilanti Township, and Ypsilanti City have partnered to form the Eastern Washtenaw Safety Alliance. What other partnerships with neighborhoods, townships, the county, EMU, the state, and other entities should the city pursue?
That's a fun one to not have time to think about, because that's a really open question. I think some of the very logistical cost savings that we should continue to look at with our neighboring municipalities, like we're doing, like I mentioned before, the motor pool, are things to look at. So there's a lot we can do short of collapsing. But we should also have on the table, not necessarily collapsing departments, because we've gone down that line with certain things, looking at jointly with the township or the sheriff, and we shouldn't reopen every issue just because there's a new administration in our community. But I think we can look at policy decisions, and I'll give you one example I like to use with EMU that's come up on our DDA, where there can be a win-win. So EMU, we know, really internalized their student center a number of years ago, and it really impacted fairly negatively that section of Cross Street by the water tower. It's had a resurgence lately, but that impact is still very much felt, and a lot of vacancies there. So EMU also does not allow outside catering on its campus. So by being the major landowner, the major employer in our community, we have many thriving and new and emerging restaurants, caterers, etc., yet they don't have access to what would be a primary customer base for them. So I know that EMU's case is that we need to run our food service at a cost neutral. Well, let's just make your food service a smaller cost neutral and give an opportunity for that win-win of our community businesses to have that opportunity with the campus as customers and introduce them in that way. So I think that's a kind of policy change that we can look at that doesn't have to negatively impact anyone, but can also impact positively. Things like joint purchasing are other opportunities where we look at the contracts that we have, particularly if we can have them with local or Michigan-based businesses where that money recirculates in the economy, so that whether it's EMU or the county or the city and our surrounding townships can look jointly at purchasing and how we can find cost savings by looking and investing in and possibly helping to grow, particularly our local businesses in that way.
Thank you, Ms. Edmonds. The next respondent is Mr. Bridges. Absolutely. Question number 9. Concerning police, the Washtenaw Sheriff, EMU Public Safety Officers, Ypsilanti Township, and Ypsilanti City have partnered to form the Eastern Washtenaw Safety Alliance. What other partnerships with neighborhoods, townships, the county, EMU, the state, and other entities should the city pursue?
That's a good question, and it's kind of backed up with an email that I sent out. Back in November, my nonprofit organization created a Washtenaw County Area Stop the Violence Initiative. I sent out an email to State Representative Dave Rutledge all the way down to the mayor of Ypsilanti, the township, and everybody. Here's the email. Did I get support for the initiative? No. When I'm mayor, those are the gaps that I would break. The ability to be able to work with everybody when there's a crisis happening in our community is essential. When you pick and choose which side you want to support because you don't like a person, that's bad government. But it goes on to quote, to our mayor, respond to my email and asking him to help join with this initiative that we're putting together to address the crime in our community. And he says, thank you for the email, but unfortunately, I'm working on responsibilities of it, working on my father's finances. I'm sorry, I can't attend. So these are the gaps that I would like to break. When you can't work with a side because of your own clique preference, that destroys Ypsi. I want to break those divides. Neighborhood associations, men's association, I was the president of the Heritage Park Men's Association. We gave Christmas parties. We gave a little bit of everything in the community. Didn't get support from the mayor or our city representatives. So those are the cliques that I would do. I would break those cliques. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges. And Mr. Murdock.
I think we've talked about the Eastern Washtenaw Safety Alliance, but I want to talk a little bit about regionalization and cooperation, because the conversation here just sounds like we're not doing any of that. I've been involved in intergovernmental cooperation for years. In fact, I was on a committee with Ypsi Township representatives that ended up creating the Ypsilanti District Library some time ago. I serve on the Washtenaw Area Transportation Authority, which is municipalities throughout the county to distribute federal highway money. I served for a while as a representative to the Ypsilanti Community Utilities Authority, a joint venture with Ypsi Township. So we have a lot of experience in that stuff. Since being on council recently, we've done a myriad of things in cooperation. We do joint dispatch now. We do a joint program with Pittsfield Township with a police dog. AATA, going to AAATA was probably one of the biggest accomplishments that we've done in terms of regionalization. That took a lot of time. We worked on that for several years. I was a city representative of the Urban Core Group that put that together. And now we have it, and we have expanded service, and we have a dedicated funding service. That was a plus. So we've done cooperation with Washtenaw County on a variety of things, from Brownsfield to parks things. The recreation center is one of them that we did. And as far as Eastern goes, we have the best relationships we've had with Eastern since I can remember, going back to when I was a student and old William Harold was the president. But we do joint purchasing with them. We just had a meeting last week and trying to develop an alternative vehicle policy with CNG that we could jointly do, and we've done a myriad of things with them.
Thank you, Mr. Murdock. Tonight we've had a lot of difficult questions that the candidates have addressed. Our 10th question is a little bit lighter and is in honor of tonight's venue. And I'd like to ask each candidate in turn, starting with Ms. Edmonds, what is a good book that you have read recently that you would recommend, and why?
Can we not say read recently? Shoot, I have to think. I know, I'm going to use my time to think. Figure out an answer for you here. It is a great question. I read newspapers cover to cover. I don't read books cover to cover very often, so I'm trying, although I'm a huge supporter of the library, and I love it. I actually love reference books. I know that sounds really weird, but my partner can attest to the fact that I actually read reference books a lot, so they're not really cover to cover books. And I'm trying to think of one of my favorite reference books. Okay, so here's what I've been reading lately. Now I'm thinking about it, and I've been reading it cover to cover is a book about how to raise native butterflies in Michigan in your home. I've been doing a lot of butterfly raising, from collecting from dill plants and monarchs, etc., and getting to watch the caterpillars grow and release them. Actually has been my calm and peaceful space during this candidacy. So that's a light kind of answer, but that actually has been what I've been carrying around with me everywhere and reading cover to cover. So I can tell you all about black eastern swallowtails and what the caterpillars' eggs look like, etc. And it's actually been really fun to sort of retreat into a little caterpillar eating dill land. So that's what I got. That's what I'm reading.
Thank you, Ms. Edmonds. Next respondent is Mr. Bridges.
Well, it's a kind of a twofold answer. The Holy Bible, number one, because that keeps me grounded when things don't go right. It keeps me strong when I don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. And it keeps me very, very close to my God when people persecute me for the wrong reasons. But I guess this is a revelation that I'm doing currently. And I think I see Mike Radzik in the audience. I'm writing a book currently, autobiography of Tyron Bridges, A Telltale All. And I'm hoping to put the finishing chapter when I become mayor of Ypsilanti and share my 360 story with so many people that one day when you ask the next person that runs for mayor, they would say, I read the autobiography of Tyron Bridges. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges. And Mr. Murdock?
A little bit like Amanda, I skimmed through a lot of articles and books, don't read them all. I've been reading a lot of very exciting books on planning and the death of suburbs and all that new urbanism stuff, and form-based codes and all that, so I can keep up with our planning commission on what they're doing. But I did reread To Kill a Mockingbird after we saw the play at Eastern, and I recommend that to anybody.
Thank you, Mr. Murdock. At this time, we've covered all 10 questions from the committee, and we've had your questions gathered in the meantime. I have them here. We have a chance to answer as many of them as possible, and then we'll do closing statements from each candidate of 3 minutes each. Let's start with one of the audience questions concerning youth in Ypsilanti. How can you, How can you imagine increasing political and civic engagement among youth of color in the city of Ypsilanti? What ways can we design programming to support youth in the city? Why don't we start with Mr. Murdock?
Interesting question. And I don't have a real good answer to that. We certainly need more opportunities in the city that have been mentioned for youth employment, youth recreation, and youth involvement in civic life to get them more involved in civic life moving forward. We do in the city. We eliminated our recreation program a dozen years ago. But we've been trying to maintain what little recreation we can. We have the YDO programs. We have programs at Parkridge, and we need to do more. Hopefully, with the rec center, that will be assisting that. But that's some years off. In the job situation, there aren't enough jobs for youth or others that are in this community. We should be working with Washtenaw County, their workforce program, and Spark East to develop work for people in areas that people can do. Not everybody is going to get a 4 or 6 year degree and move on. I was reading an article in Bridge Magazine that says there's tens of thousands of job openings in Michigan that don't need a 4 year degree, and they pay very well. They're machinists, truck drivers, healthcare workers, and so forth. We need to grow with Washtenaw Community College and the county those programs that allow people to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Murdock. Next respondent is Mr. Bridges.
Once again, I know you guys keep hearing me say the behavior workshop. In teaching youth how to build computers, where in return they take those skills and show seniors how to connect on the internet and reach families that they haven't reached in years. Reconnect with the outside world. I've struggled when I put this program together to try to get funding for a program for youth that were from the South End of Ypsilanti and also in Ann Arbor. They came to Ypsi for my program. Definitely some of our mismanaging of our spending in Ypsilanti, and I don't want to step on any toes, but currently we see where our monies has been allotted in the city. If I had $100,000 at my disposal, I'll put it that way, I would hire at least 10 youth at $9 an hour to do many things that I have been currently doing in the organization, working with seniors. Working with seniors. We have youth that are now respecting seniors, and seniors are requesting them to come back up to their homes and help them with things with their technology. So we have to find work for youth before youth find work for themselves. So I definitely, if I had the budget of $100,000 to shift around, all youth would be included in that plan that don't have work. We would find work for them.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges. The audience question: how can you imagine increasing political and civic engagement among youth of color in the city of Ypsilanti? What ways can we design programming support for youth in the city?
Sure. So I work a lot in this space at Growing Hope. I both have employed youth for many years, teens who live in our Ypsilanti area directly, as well as through Michigan Work. So I have a strong relationship with Shamar, who runs our workforce development department. And we have so much more opportunity because there is the ability to leverage more federal funds than they're even leveraging if we have young people who are connected as citizens. So I think we need to partner with that program in particular, which gives both youth work experiences as well as wraparound services that particularly low-income youth need to be successful in learning those soft skills and be successful in those jobs. So there's a trajectory, and that department is in somewhat transformation, and we need to really actively engage and support them. We also need to continue to support our youth-serving nonprofits. I work with many of them already. The B Side of Youth trains teen entrepreneurs in this community. That comes out of EMU and does some really great, strong work. Ozone House Youth Drop-In Center is helping many youth have a positive space to be. They're also doing work skills training, as is Food Gatherers Culinary Arts Training Program for formerly homeless youth. So there are many entities in the community. I'm plugged into many of the nonprofits. And we need to engage as a city more in the Washtenaw, I think it's Washtenaw Alliance for Children and Youth, which is a county-wide collaboration of youth-serving nonprofits. Because the facts are very much that youth of color, in particular, have some of the highest barriers to summer employment than other youth in our communities. So knowing what it means to supervise a young person in their first job, I can bring that to other business owners and help them sort of take that chance, and actually I've talked to a number of them about that already. We also need to get this rec center moving really, really fast, because that's a really important thing, and get that going as quickly as we can now. Support our YMCA in offering summer programming, Washtenaw Community College and what they're doing at Park Ridge Community Center, and we need to make sure that there's transit, which we're moving forward on, so that our youth can get around to jobs, to school, and to other opportunities, because for young people that is a huge barrier, particularly low-income young folks.
Thank you, Ms. Edmonds. Here's another one of your audience questions. How familiar are you with the immigration situation? Are you willing to collaborate in helping immigrant families feel more safe in our community? Are you willing to collaborate in helping strategize to help this situation? In what ways? And first respondent is Mr. Bridges.
There are a lot of abandoned houses that can be used in our city. A lot. We need to invite as many people as we can in our city and show that we are a loving community, and we are open the doors for anyone that wants to strive positively. We also need to be aware of our Detroit transit behavior that's polluting our city as well. I'm not throwing Detroit under the bus, but we have a lot of Detroiters and outsiders coming in our city. We have to get familiar with our residents. We have to reach out and touch everyone and make sure everyone knows that we want everyone included, not just one side once again. So definitely I'll be supportive of allowing immigrants to come and live in our great city, because we take pride in Ypsilanti, don't we? Or you wouldn't be here today.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges. Ms. Edmonds.
Sure. The first part of the question was, are you familiar with the immigration situation? And I know that there's been off and on, and again recently, a number of raids of, I think, particularly Latino residents. And so I'm not in depth familiar, but I have been over the years and have employed some young immigrant young people in Growing Hope, so I've learned more through that. I work with Casa Latino, which is our only Latino-serving social service agency in the county that's still growing. I've been working with them since their inception. They're just completing a Latino health survey, looking at the disparities, both in things like activities and transit and health and mental health, and the challenges that folks face. So I think I've learned further about the issues, but I know there's really different generational challenges among immigrants and refugees both, and that we need to recognize the place and really the asset. I think the governor's actually been pretty wise in looking at Detroit and saying we really have opportunity to help our immigrants and refugees in Detroit grow businesses. And I think we can look in that same way here, where we already have an African grocery store 1 block away and a number of immigrant and refugee-owned businesses. We also need to then think about how we can specifically welcome the refugee population. Jewish Family Services is the one who does refugee placement for Washtenaw County, and they have both work skills training, job placement, as well as other social services. So I think that's something we can engage more actively with in the community with what JFS does here. So they have many people coming from all over the world who have advanced degrees but can't get recertified here. So people who are really fabulous, great workers that we can attract and recruit here. So I think celebrating those immigrant and refugee cultures, as well as and building from there, while we're also looking at the very real legal and other disparities that people are facing, and working to counteract some of those discriminatory practices.
Thank you, Ms. Edmonds. The question from the audience. How familiar are you with the immigration situation? Are you willing to collaborate in helping immigrant families feel more safe in our community? Are you willing to collaborate in helping strategize to help in this situation? In what ways?
The short answer to all that is yes. Maybe I should leave it at that. I'm not as familiar with immigration issues as I probably should be, at least as a local thing. I've met recently with Martha, and we've discussed various issues and some suggestions she thinks the city should go in direction, which I would support at that time. Ypsilanti's always been a diverse community. We've always been a welcoming community, and we're going to continue to be that way, particularly if I'm there.
Thank you, Mr. Murdock. Next audience question. What is your strategy for dealing with delinquent and absentee landlords? How will you protect the people from slumlords and other exploitative practices? Let's start with Mr. Bridges.
I would look to, once when I'm mayor, I would look to adding people of all sides on boards that will handle the bad practices of landlords, that would bring recommendations to the council so we can take action. I have a history of living with landlords that doesn't do what they're supposed to do, but we still manage. There needs to be a lot of checks and balances from the ordinance department. It needs to step up. Look at Vistion, first of all. We're talking about slumlords. Look at the Vistion plant. Whoever the developers are needs to go over there and cut that field over there, because it's looking really bad the first thing you see when you come in off the highway. So if we're trying to attract new people, we need to enforce with all landlords.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges. And Mr. Murdock?
The city has a rental housing inspection program, which we adopted back in my previous mayor days in the 80s, where all round units have to be inspected every 2 years and so forth. And we go through that program. There needs to be a little bit more oomph than that. We also have a vacant building ordinance for people that neglect their properties to the nth degree, and I think we should look at putting a little bit more clout in that, so places like the old depot or the Thompson building, for whatever, can't be allowed to get to where they're at. There should be agencies. When I was going to Eastern, we had a tenants union there that basically dealt with issues of tenant relationships, tenant-landlord relationships. There isn't one now. Probably be a good thing that possibly Eastern students might want to reinvigorate, and we could probably support that or lend some advice to that. But where there are issues of code enforcement, whatever, housing inspections and stuff that need to be changed to get a stronger handle on things, then we should look at those and do those.
Thank you, Mr. Murdock. Ms. Edmonds?
Yeah, so I agree with that. We look at every thing that we have in the book, and I think in particular, also in our commercial areas, we're looking at that as a DDA right now, some of this vacant building ordinances, and what else we can do for landlords who have actually find places ready to rent in our commercial districts that just won't, that just don't care and won't put a for rent sign up and have a dilapidated building. So we're doing some knocking on their doors where they live, we found where they live, and some things like that, just so that they talk to us, because, and we're then also offering them carrots, right? It's a hard thing you want to both enforce, but then offer that support. So what can we do to make it what we need to be, right? That's what matters. What matters is that we make these properties, residential, commercial, etc., what we want them to be. Cared for, clean, and ideally occupied. So let's think both about the tools that we have in our toolbox. So in our residential neighborhoods, we have things like the neighborhood weatherization program that might make a property more affordable and more attractive, and help people understand, as we can again reach them, help people understand that they're going to win if they improve and invest in their property. I know that's really hard for an investor that lives on the other side of the country and doesn't really care. So we hit those people more with ordinances and code enforcement sort of things. But as much as we could incentivize and work to help these folks move forward, then that helps. I was talking to someone in Ward 1 about a challenge that their neighbor had, that the neighbor's grass wasn't mowed, and then they let me know, well, that neighbor actually was now living in an assisted living facility. Okay, so how can we get together and help that neighbor out? It's not always that someone has been derelict, that is definitely is part of the case, but how can we think about how we support our neighbors, especially as they have varying abilities to keep up their properties? That's more so for homeownership. Finally, I think as properties turn over through tax foreclosure and other auctions, let's think about how we can also increase homeownership, particularly of neighbors in the community. How can that renter become that owner of that property and be more invested for the long term?
Thank you, Ms. Edmonds. Looks as though we have time for probably 2 more questions. This one, I'm going to paraphrase it. What is your personal perspective on the planned housing development on Water Street? Let's start with Mr. Murdock.
Since I was the only one up here who had to make that decision, I supported it for a lot of reasons, and let me go through with them. First, it fits the concept of high-density housing in the complex that was in all the plans. Second, it took a piece of property that was difficult to develop, less than 2 acres, and now it's going to be developed and taxable. They were going to, as part of the project, they were going to invest $1 million into infrastructure beyond what they needed, which included the extension of River Street down to basically the river, the extension of South Street over to River Street, and with full sidewalks, trees, street, and all the utilities, stormwater, sewer, and water to service basically that whole 2/3 of the site. With that done, the rest of the site is going to be far more marketable, because you don't argue about who and when is going to put in that infrastructure. Much of the discussion about that was, this is, it's public housing, it's Section 8 housing, it's really none of that. It's now called workforce housing or affordable housing to some extent. The income levels for that housing project are based on Washtenaw County. They're very high. I think it's $50-some thousand per family before. So it's going to be more of a mixed income level housing project than Section 8. There are no site-based Section 8 certificates involved in it, and there are no, it's not a public housing, it's privately owned.
Thank you, Mr. Murdock. Next, Ms. Edmonds.
Sure. 2 things on that. I actually agree entirely with Councilmember Murdock, both for those reasons of it, the development, building out infrastructure, and doing some brownfield remediation on the site, and moving us forward to then attract other development, particularly because the roads and the infrastructure will be built out. Also because I think we do have that need, and the data shows us that we have that need for what really is market rate housing. 63%, I think, of the residents in Ypsilanti would qualify to live there. But more importantly than that, and my belief on that, is really what's the approach a mayor is going to take. So the mayor's going to come into office, and there's going to be projects on the table, some already moving forward, some still pending, and some sort of way ahead, and others, of course, still to come to us. I think the reality is, my approach is let's figure out where we are at a given moment, and let's figure out how we move forward. So if that project is still on the table, we work, whether or not I support it, to make that the best project it can be, to add the green features, to make it quality materials, to challenge that design really is the best design that company has done of any of their housing communities across the country, which they say they want it to be. So we're going to hold them to that. We're going to hold them to what they've told our police chief, that they're willing to make considerable improvements into safety and other issues in the building. And we're gonna expect the best, because we can't, once something's moving forward, right, there are points in the process where we might stop it, and there are appropriate points to do that, but once something is all the way through those approvals and ready to build, etc., it doesn't help us to go talk about what could have been. It only helps us to think about how we make what we have going forward the best.
Thank you, Ms. Edmonds. Mr. Goodrich?
I believe personally our local government got it wrong this time, because we already have existing public housing that needs to be redeveloped. We already have public housing. We have a lot of buildings that needs to come up to code. And that goes back to the landlord. The city had an opportunity to get that problem right with the Ypsilanti Housing Commission. When we redeveloped the Hamilton Crossing, we should have had a duplicate plan in the woodworks for Park Ridge as well. But then wait, Johnny come lately afterwards, and then decide to put it down on Water Street is a bad idea, because we already have property that needs to be taken care of, or make the landlords take care of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges. Before our closing statements, we have time for one last question from the audience. As this event is being held tonight, people in the city are living a third world country existence with little or no access to food, clothing, or shelter. Our organization, OUR 2020 Vision, views this as a human rights crisis. What role will you bring to this urgent issue? Let's start with Mr. Murdock.
Again, this issue was brought up in the city of Ypsilanti, and there is a lot of county activity around homelessness with the county economic development office and their housing office, and in conjunction with the city of Ann Arbor. We should partner with them in terms of solving or attempting to solve those issues. And that's basically all I can say about that.
Thank you, Mr. Murdock. Next respondent is Mr. Bridges.
I know it. I grew up in the community, public housing, food stamps. I know the issue. I know the divide. As a minority, I've experienced a lot of divide from this great city at its leadership's helm. As mayor, I do believe that I am one of the best candidates that could recognize that deficiency that our city has and do something about it. You might not like me because of the things and the straightforwardness that I come, but I am a minority, and I can recognize when we struggle, when you grow up in the community on public assistance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges. Ms. Edmonds?
So as you've heard me already say, the disparities in our community are very real, and I think in many ways, in all ways, really inexcusable in our county. You know, the average age of death in Chelsea Township is, I think it's 84, and the average age of death in Ypsilanti Township, which is actually the lowest, those are the lowest and highest average ages of death in our county, our relatively affluent county, is 66. We have near 20-year spread from the eastern to the western side of the county. If we look at maps of disparities of income, of health, of education, of all sorts of things, that's the same, and that's not okay. And as many of you know, that's part of what drives my work in the world, or my work at Growing Hope, my work in the community, and also what drives me in a candidacy to be mayor. Because we can solve these problems. So that means that we bring people to the table. Again, one of the roles of mayor is appointing people to boards and commissions. So who has and hasn't been at our tables before, to have that voice in the policy decisions that we make that affect things? I actually think that one of the things I would explore is starting a youth commission. We had a youth member when I served on the city's Parks and Rec Commission, and there are models all over the country for youth actually as advisory board members. I think that's something that could give further voice to often people without a voice in our community. We also need to then think about having our particularly social and human service providers, who I know almost all of them very well, sort of at the table, not only to do the Band-Aid approach or the handout, but those who are thinking about and working towards the systemic reasons where we have inequities and how we can get at them. And there are many, and I can't go into them all in 2 minutes. We also then need to ensure that as a city and as a city government, we're at the other tables we're really lucky. We have a very progressive Washtenaw County government where there are many networks like WACY, the Washtenaw Alliance for Children and Youth, Success by Six, Washtenaw Blueprint for, to End Homelessness. There are a number of countywide plans really looking both at the services as well as the root causes. And we don't actually have municipal representation at many of those tables, and that's another thing we can do to work with the folks who are working on those things.
Thank you, Ms. Edmonds. Now we'll turn to closing statements from Mr. Bridges, Mr. Murdock, and Ms. Edmonds in turn. Each candidate has 3 minutes to make their closing statement. Mr. Bridges?
Thank you once again for hosting this forum. I think we need to have more forums when any elected city of Ypsilanti official comes to the forefront. Once again, 45 years resident of Ypsilanti. I have a heart for Ypsilanti. I have a heart for the youth and a heart to see the city move forward. I don't join or belong to any cliques. You know just about everything in my background, my past, everything. I've been transparent. You can check my record. But you can see that I have Ypsilanti blood in me. I wanted to make a change years ago when I was a child, when I grew up in Ypsilanti, as I showed y'all that picture earlier. I said I wanted to do something great in Ypsilanti. I didn't have the opportunity as many children. When I went to Ypsilanti High School, I played football, but I did get it discriminated against when I was a football player. Actually, I was a second string quarterback unto Todd Hendricks, who's a sheriff right now. I didn't have money to buy cleats. Many times I went to school without food, hungry, trying to learn an education, knowing that my family tried to do the best that they could with 6 children, single parent. Those obstacles aren't offered to my opponents, but I can rest assured that I'm a survivor. I'm a survivor, and I love Ypsi, and I'm still here. I will be here for the rest of my life. I want to be cremated here in Ypsilanti. That shows you my passion. I want to see our youth do better. I don't want everybody to look at a young African American and say, oh damn, he's going to I need to clench my purse or hold my pocket. I want you to look at an African American and say, well, they can be something, they can be somebody. Not just reading the papers about these youth getting killed in our communities because of lack of resources. Definitely, I do believe that I can bridge that gap. I will open up to the Ypsilanti Community Schools because I know the rec center will be built in the near future, but far off. But what are we going to do about tomorrow? There are schools that are closed that we could utilize, and we could utilize them for a positive purpose. Training, we could usher in Eastern and everybody else on the same page. Once again, thank you for having us. Thank you, citizens, for coming and listening to our long-windedness, and God bless.
Mr. Murdock?
Yeah, I have to, again, like to thank the organizers of the event. I think it's been very, very helpful. When people ask me, why do you want to be mayor? You've done that, been there, and so forth. The reason that I want to be mayor is when I came back a few years back, the city I thought was in trouble. We need to make some changes. We made several of them. We've been in the process of putting things together, building a new team with a new city manager, and so forth, and I've been part of that process. I would like to continue that process. I'm the only one here that's had the experience of actually making those decisions at city council, and they've been tough ones, some of them. We get a lot of views from some people, but I've worked on all the issues that are important that we talked about, and we managed to move the city forward, whether it's fiscal stability, we've talked about that before. Whether it's trying to deal with Water Street debt, we've talked about that before. We're going to talk about sustainability. We didn't talk much about that here. We've done the LED conversions, saving, not only being sustainable, but saving the city over $100,000 a year. We created an energy efficiency account to do the same in our buildings, and we're going to save a ton of money there. So we've been doing those things. On transportation, so important, we talked about AETA, critical to our needs, important part of that process. We talked about non-motorized transportation. We have a plan. We have a complete streets ordinance that requires us to take consideration other modes of transportation, and that's what we're doing. We're doing extending bike paths. We're making our community more walkable. All the plans that we already have, the new master plan, and others talk about making the community more walkable, and that's what we're going to do. That's the goals. When we get the opportunity, we're going to try to do what we can on that. So we've been moving along, and I've been a part of all that process. We've got a lot of challenges ahead, and a lot to do, but I've been the person that's been on city council, that's moved a lot of those items, and I'd like to continue to do that because I'm in the best position to do that. When we get there, the new council is going to have 2 new members. It's going to have two people that serve less than 1 term. So I think I would bring the leadership necessary to guide that process, and I ask for your vote to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Edmonds.
So people also, of course, ask me why in the world would you want to do this? And as they know, I serve the community and have for some time in other ways, and why would I also want to be serving the community in this way? So I thought a lot about that in the last couple of years, and I really believe in sort of the right leader for the right place at the right time. And that we have to think about as a community, or in any leadership setting, who has the skills. A leader isn't static, and it's not a good leader isn't a good leader in every situation, or in every period of time, or in every setting. So I thought a lot about what do we need, and what do I see, and what do I hear from our community that we need. And I think 3 things are what have led me to seek this opportunity to serve this community in a new way. So I think strong and positive relationships and being that ambassador. Ambassador, ambassador, ambassador. Our city manager runs our city. Our mayor, of course, chairs council and has 1 vote on it. It's not an all-powerful mayor like in other communities. The mayor is that chief ambassador and sets that tone, and for me, that positive tone that really does attract people and attract energy and attract ideas. And that's what I've been already doing, and have many strong relationships with Ypsi Township, with EMU, with the county, with the state, and endorsed by a number of folks there. I think also thinking about leadership experience and perspective. So I haven't served in an elected capacity besides 20 years ago when I actually served on my local school board, but I have been appointed by our governor to a state council. I've served on national, binational, state, and local boards and commissions, including governmental and non-governmental ones. On many of those boards and commissions, I've been elected the vice chair or the chair because the people I've served with have recognized my belief in bringing voices to the table, having good process, coming to consensus around vision, and moving forward. So I've done that in a lot of perspectives for 20 years, also serving as an executive director with a board chair, sort of like that mayor-city manager relationship. I understand from both perspectives what it means both to sort of be managed by and to manage and to lead in a body. So I think I bring that to the table. Third, creative, out-of-the-box, can-do attitude and forward thinking. And I think most people know in Growing Hope, that was a vision that I had. Actually probably about 14 years ago. We're 11 years old as a formal organization. And what I do and what I'm motivated by in the world is bringing vision into reality. Not just my vision, but bringing voices to the table so that visions of a lot of people in our community, particularly those who haven't been included, are brought into life. So I think I've done that in a number of ways. And I want this community where, again, everyone can thrive. And so I appreciate the opportunity to seek your vote. And if the electorate chooses me to serve in this way, I'm going to be honored at the responsibility to do so. Thank you.
Let's thank the candidates for appearing here tonight and giving us their time and their thoughts. Thank you all. thank you to the audience members for attending as well. This concludes our Democratic Mayoral Forum tonight. Thank you so much for coming, and good night.